of every kind, or what the ground causes to grow on themselves, that is to say human beings, and of what they do not know. In the field of physiology, there is a verse which appears to be extremely significant. But to understand it, we have to know that chemical reactions occur in the intestine and that substances extracted from food inside pass into the bloodstream, and that the bloodstream transports them to all the organs of the body, among which are the milk-producing mammary glands. That is precisely what is said in this verse of the Surah Al-Nahl. وَإِنَّ لَكُمْ فِي الْأَلَامِ لَعِبْرَةً نُسْقِيكُم مِّمَّا فِي بُطُونِهِ مِنْ بَيْنِ فَرْثٍ وَدَمٍ لَبَنًا غَلِيظًا سَائِغًا لِلشَّارِبِينَ. Verily in cattle there is a lesson for you. We give you to drink what is inside their bodies, coming from a conjunction between the contents of the intestine and the blood, a milk pure and pleasant for those who drink it. The Quranic revelation considerably enriched man with data about himself, as we shall see, but its teachings have been clearly and completely understood only in modern times. As a medical doctor, particularly attracted to the natural sciences and physiology, I must confess that when I read the Quran, when I read the Quran in the original text for the first time, these data concerning man were those which impressed me the most. This is the reason why, as soon as I finished my first study, the Bible, the Quran, and science, I seized a favorable opportunity to deliver a lecture before the French Academy of Medicine with a special reference to human reproduction in the Quran. In order to carry out a valid comparison, one must remember that there existed a host of superstitions and myths about this topic in days of old, and emphasized the absence of any reference in the Quran to the mistaken ideas prevalent at the time of the communication to man. Let us mention that several verses evoke the complexity of the male fertilizing liquid and the fact that an infinitely small quantity of this liquid, expressed by nutfa in the Quran, is required to ensure fertilization. This is also expressed by quintessence, if I may so translate the Arabic word sulala. The implantation of the egg in the female genital organ is perfectly described in several verses by the word alaq, as in the Surah Al-Alaq. Khalaqal insana min alaq. But my translation is the following one. God fashioned the man from something which clings. I do not think that there is any accurate translation of the word alaq, other than to use once more, its primitive meaning. To speak here of an adherence or a blood clot is a mistake. They are both derivative meanings quite out of place in this context. The evolution of the embryo inside the maternal uterus is a subject of reflection whose simple words correspond exactly to fundamental stages in its growth, as it appears in this verse of the Surah Al-Muminun. فَغَلَقْنَا لَلَكَةَ مُدْغَةً فَغَلَقْنَا الْمُدْغَةَ إِزَامًا فَكَسَوْنَا الْحِزَامَ لَحْمًا. We fashioned the thing which clings into a shewed lump of flesh, and we fashioned the shewed flesh into bones, and we clothed the bones with intact flesh. Thus, an initial aspect of the embryo is evoked, and thereafter the muscles covering the bones. We know that the embryo passes through a stage when some of its parts are out of proportion with what is later to become the individual. The Surah Al-Hajj seems to allude to this. فَإِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ مِنْ عَلَقَةٍ مِنْ مُدْغَةٍ مُخَلَّقَةٍ وَغَيْرِ مُخَلَّقَةٍ. We fashioned you into something which clings, into a lump of flesh in proportion and out of proportion. In the Surah Al-Sajdah, there is a reference to the senses and the viscera. وَجَعَلَ لَكُمْ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَرَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. God appointed for you the senses of hearing, sight, and the viscera. All these quotations are in harmony with what was to be discovered many centuries later. In view of the state of knowledge in Prophet Muhammad's day, it is inconceivable that many of the statements in the Qur'an which are connected with science could have been the work of a man. It is therefore perfectly legitimate not only to regard the Qur'an as the expression of a revelation, but also to award it a very special place on account of the guarantee of authenticity it provides and the presence in it of reflections which, when studied today, appear as a challenge to human explanation. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for your kind attention. Assalamu alaikum.
I believe in theory of evolution as propounded by zoologist Gracie. If you do, then it is not compatible with teachings of Quran as discussed by Sheikh Abdul Mabood in his article.
Excuse me, but I do not know the article of Sheikh Abdul Mabood. Excuse me, so that I cannot compare with the theory which is not the theory of Professor Grasset himself alone, not at all, which is described in this book, What is the Origin of Man? I have written a small chapter about the creative evolution, is what is now absolutely sure, since now we know that the genome are responsible for the transformation of the functions of the cells, consequently to transformation of tissues, and consequently transformation of the entire living being. There is no doubt about that, and recently I had the pleasure to read a book which was written by a famous Iranian theologian. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the name.